each other. All that being said, Prime Minister, whenever you're ready.
Hello. Anyways, I'm Riyan, I'm the Prime Minister. No preferred pronouns. Hello. Yeah. Riyan, Prime Minister, no preferred pronouns. Before I start, a quick shout out to my teammate Rishabh Gupta for being such a great teammate and helping me along with these cases. It's a really mutually beneficial partnership which we have. Secondly, shout out to my peers who are here today to support me. Ridik Bhai, Raina Saxena from my own DevSoc and my own DevSoc in general. Thirdly, to my mentors from my college, Mr. Angad Singh Chawla, Mr. V. Sairam and Mr. Avans Chadda, who is not here today, but I owe a lot to him. And finally, to my juniors as well, who are here to support me and my DevSoc in general. With that...
Audience, please.
Yes, audience, please respect. Finally, I'll be starting my speech on a reverse count of 3, 2, 1. Now, chimpanzees cannot intuitively solve calculus, but that does not mean that humans cannot. Which means the reason why we are able to solve problems which require calculus is simply because we're different than chimpanzees. We are different species than chimpanzees, and there's a different way in how we intuitively perceive mathematics. Which means at all points of time, how this debate is going to look like is I'm going to prove to you how just this diversity of species also means you have a diversity in how problems of all aspects of humanity are approached, and why diversity as a bottom line is good. I believe the first outcome as bottom line is that world is simply more exposed to more diverse approaches to problems, but also more unique problems which arise from the fact that there are more unique species which have unique experiences. The thing is, groups develop independent approaches to concepts, which is, again, going back to my chimpanzee example. The reason why chimpanzees cannot intuitively do calculus is probably because they have no understanding of mathematics beyond addition, etc. The reason why probably human beings are stuck at probably cannot do interdimensional travel, etc. is probably because our understanding of mathematics is limited to calculus and not beyond that. Which means at a point in time where we have a species which is able to intuitively probably understand mathematics beyond calculus, to whatever level which requires probably interstellar travel or time traveling, I believe that's such a very good outcome in general. But that only probably happens when you have more species in general, where you have more diversity in general. This is not a stretch because the delta from chimpanzees to humans already exists, which means there is potential for the genetic pool to simply provide the enough genetic diversity for there to be a jump in cognitive levels from calculus to something which requires interdimensional travel as well. But more importantly, I believe there are a lot of problems in the status quo today. Yeah, sure.
Has a chimpanzee ever asked you how to solve problems? Do you have a discussion with chimpanzee right now?
Yes, chimpanzees are able to communicate by screeching and shouting. I mean, that's how they tell you that they have problems and they want to solve them. Right, later. So the thing is that the problems humans have, the reason why there are unsolvable problems today is because the approaches of every single human stems from a single source. That is, the way we approach problems is similar irrespective of how we grew up, where we grew up. Which is, many societies over time independently have achieved same outcomes like hierarchical structures, languages and culture, which independently form similar structure as other independent human societies, simply because how humans intuitively, irrespective of where they grow up, perceive all these concepts. Our approaches to modern problems like computing, medicine, etc. are thus shackled by these same problems, which means the lack of distinct approaches consistently hurts our ability to solve a lot of unique problems. Like, why can't our computers be faster? Or why can't we probably have a new approach to mathematics which solves the Poincare conjecture intuitively? Or why can't we solve this disease like cancer, etc.? Probably because all of our approaches are too similar to each other to really have any sort of different approaches and trial and error being effective in the first place. Which means it's a capacity issue on the side of Homo sapiens to be able to solve these problems. Which is, our programming language has limitations because our approach to language is very similar irrespective of where we grow up. Our mathematics is limited because how Homo sapiens probably intuitively perceive mathematics. But more importantly, our society is probably patriarchal because independently Homo sapiens probably became patriarchal, and they intuitively thought that patriarchy is the only way in which societies can effectively function, and they probably did not have any reference point for how a matriarchal society or more egalitarian society can function effectively. Which means at all points of time, our modern problems stem from the fact that we don't have a diverse pool of solutions to be able to reference to and look forward to. The second answer which I'm going to tell you is, how are these species different? I believe genetics provides species way to unlock a lot of things, which means Neanderthals probably empirically had larger brain sizes than humans, which means they probably had different regions in brains for different things, which probably also means that they approach different things differently, which means they have probably a different perception of how memory works, of how different societal structures work, and probably simply had different genetics. But also things like genetics are very important because it also adds further abilities, which means some species are intuitively more curious than other species. This is why you probably associate cats as being curious and sloths as being lazy, etc. in the first place. But also it can simply add newer features like you being intuitively able to see magnetic fields and migratory birds following magnetic fields to go to the home, etc. These are things which genetics is able to provide, which means genetics probably has the capacity to probably give a lot of this diversity in the first place. But secondly, I'll tell to you that why this diversity unlocks these impacts is because take this intuitive example. For you today, you solve computers by tackling on the concept of binary numbers. But the problem is, a human being 1,000 years ago had probably the same capacity to perceive mathematics, but he probably did not know the concept of binary numbers. But these concepts evolve over time, which means at all points in time where societies are faced with different challenges, are forced to adapt into different niches, things like tsunamis, floods, natural calamities, migration patterns, etc., force different species groups to interact with each other differently, create different problems in how these species perceive problems. They're forced to make new solutions, which means that maybe humans probably did agriculture, probably because for some reason their food sources died out, etc. Which means these other species probably will have independent problems for which they'll find independent solutions and build on these solutions to probably have bigger impacts on things like having greater concepts. Just like how our science evolved from 10,000 years ago to what it is now, I don't believe it will be any different for other species in general. Okay, PY, closing.
Yeah, so in this world, which species is more important? Is it chimpanzees or is it humans?
I believe every species is important because every species has a unique perspective and every species is able to provide a unique value to itself. That probably answers the CEO question, which means that it's important that you are able to preserve all species, but I'll prove to why the impacts, even if you probably have some sort of violence between species, are simply outweighed by the benefits you unlock. Which means, third way, how would these species probably have evolved is probably they would have had evolvement in how their language, etc., which means they probably would have an independent way in how they approach computers, different from binary system, or probably an independent way to approach mathematics, which means that their system of computers probably won't be subject to the limitations in what our computers are susceptible to, or their approach to mathematics probably is able to solve more different things in general. The outcome is that all points of time, how will this diversity and divergent approach to evolution help us? It's simple because it means that you can unlock impacts which you previously could not, which means that you can simply find newer, better medicines, obviously because you have greater genetic diversity. So if you have things like some gene causing some sort of recurrence in cancer, etc., you can number one see through genetic diversity that this species probably does not have this gene or has this particular gene which prevents this occurrence of cancer, etc. So you're probably able to see that this is probably how we tackle cancer. But more importantly, you are able to implement a lot of the different ideas to unlock things which we at today cannot possibly think can be achieved, like things like interdimensional travel, things like solving diabetes and cancer and problems like this in the first place, which means that the harms of probably violence, etc., are far outweighed by the impacts which you can unlock.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for a very fine speech, inviting everyone to open place for OO. Hello, when you're ready, give us a countdown. You're good.
Hello. Audible?
Yep.
Good. All right. Couple of quick shout-outs. Firstly to Angad Bhaiya, Beyonce call out part 2. Don't know what that makes me now that I'm teamed up with him. But secondly to old friends, Sai, Debayan, lovely to see you all here. Has been a great comp, great team up, great cap. Thank you so much. Okay. All ready? Go. Government's world would be one of intense and pernicious competition in a bid to rise and dominate other species, leading to either early extinction realistically, but at minimum the creation of subclasses which are effectively slaves or extremely discriminated. That's the case coming from opening opposition, and that's going to be the most important thing in the debate. First, on framing. I will explain that intelligence as an internal function, because this is what's common between these species, is what leads to incredible harms, because intelligence breeds within it the reason to compete and the bid to rise to the top. First, proof. What is intelligence? Let me define it clearly. Intelligence accompanies with it five things. One, curiosity and the ability to ask questions, which means you have the capability to question why things are a certain way. Two, it gives you the ability to seek purpose and to try to make sense of things around you and ponder why you are existing in life. 3, it gives you the ability to have a point of view, analytically decide what you want, and therefore develop a point of view which is consistent with how you want the world to be. And 4, ability to communicate properly so that other colleagues or whatever can understand what you're saying. Those are the inherent features of intelligence. What are the implications of this? Why does this mean that we create a race to the top for domination among these 4 or Neanderthals and all of these things? The first, intelligent species have a capability to uniquely recognize that resources and energy on the planet are limited because they see themselves that things are getting extinguished, they see that things are getting finished, which means they start understanding that if we don't get these things, we might be wiped out or might be out displaced by someone else. 2, game theoretical incentives. You understand that if you do not make the first move, someone else might make it. This creates an incentive to do it faster and do it quicker. 3, I'm going to be very clear. Cooperation is the only possible in instances where there is a clear power dynamic or there's intense trust. Why are both these things not possible with these two things? First instance in which you can cooperate is when there is a clear power dynamic that cannot be breached. The reason for this is simple, and this is empirically true, you notice this. Animals and humans coexist because they understand realistically that there are places in society and humans are the clear top class and they know they can control animals in a way that they don't know they can control these 4 other intelligent types of things, which means that there is always a threat that these are people that may try to outcompete us, which is why that scares you. So this is both at an actual and at a perceived level. The second is why is there no trust? This is simply for the fact that because they are so close in makeup and genetic understanding to you, and they demonstrate signs of intelligence which you are also able to recognize, which is also why legitimately we are scared of AI and stuff like that, is probably why you start making sure that you try to stop them and make amends that way. All of this inherently proves that because resources are limited and you have a capacity to understand that, you will always try to dominate the resources because you have a point of view and you want to get them for yourself. This is simply for the reason that one, because these are species that have continued to exist, they have an incentive to survive, obviously. No, they have an incentive to survive, and 2, they probably have a strong capability to survive, survival of the fittest, which means that they've done things that make them capable of surviving. What are the implications of this? How does this competition play out? Among these 4 intelligent species, what happens? All of them can outcompete the others in 3 simple ways. 1, on having the more number of people. What does this mean? This means all 4 of these subtypes of species start competing to procreate faster, which means that inherently the incentive that human race had to slow down procreation goes away. Because you're all trying to dominate each other, humans naturally understood that because they were not dying off, they could maintain a stable growth rate and understand that making children was not the only incentive. This is why you have much more procreation and many more human type species existing in the world. Empirically, the fact that the world has limited resources, this means that everyone would get a smaller pie even if we assume completely equal distribution, because they still are yet to prove that they are able to get more resources, more energy, more those types of things for the whole world. They don't prove that. The second impact of this is simply that when you procreate this fast, this is bad for other species, because the other way in which you compete is you want to create tools and machinery that can outcompete others. This means reckless usage of resources and energy of the universe to outcompete each other, which means killing of animals, killing of weaker species, usage of them as instrumentalization, far more. This didn't happen for humans because they know there is no legitimate competition, so they didn't need to instrumentalize these other species. But those are the reasons that didn't happen on our side of the house. What this means, and the third, yeah, sure.
You can't compare this debate to countries. You have to compare it to alien species, like probably just aliens. You don't want to invade aliens to protect yourself from aliens.
Yeah, we are competing and protecting ourselves as humans. That is what this debate case is. Simple. Okay, why are humans likely to rise to the top? This is another impact. Simple. Humans, possibly, the reason they outcompeted all of these people, these other types, was because they had the ability to think long term and plan for the long term far more than the other species. This simply means that they had better planning, better ability to do all of the mechanisms I outlined earlier, and the better ability to compete going into the long term and understanding in the short term how to deceive, how to conquer, and all of those things. Second, empirically, we know this to be true. This happened, so probably there must be reasons for it. I don't exactly know. I'm not a science major. Cool. What are the impacts of this, simply speaking? One is that other species' lives are infinitely worse as a result of this. Insofar as the debate has to be judged on a utilitarian metric, this is much more suffering for the world in this type of world. The second is that once you understand that you can dominate other species, what are you likely to do? You are likely to use them as slaves and medical tests. Because these are closest in genetic makeup to you, you start utilizing them for testing testing and health uses, which uniquely means that this causes immense amounts of lives being ended, and these are all intelligent species that we should morally care about. The problem, the reason there will not be empathy that stops this, is for two reasons. Empathy is selective. It's for your own species first and for everyone else next. This means that you have much more empathy to preserve your own race than you have empathy to care for anyone else. Two, when empathy is in a pit against survival, survival always wins. This is empirically true in the fact that these species have survived. If they were empathetic to everything else, they wouldn't have survived in the first place. But even if you believe none of this, this proves that there will be a subclass with immense discrimination and intense slavery, and this world will be one full of suffering. Even if you don't believe that, let's fight empirically. The idea is intellectual capacity in and of itself is a curse and makes life suffering for all of these things. So if more people exist and more types of intelligent beings exist, that's a bad thing for the world. One, because you ponder the questions of your universe. Two, because the inherent meaning of survival of the fittest is that you acclimatize to negative experiences faster than positive experiences. This is because you don't want things that have hurt you in the past to hurt you again, which means on net you live negative lives which are just feelings-wise much worse. On those reasons, we clearly win this debate.
Inviting DPM to extend case on behalf of the Kohli. DPM, go ahead.
Great. First of all, shout out to Riyan for being one of the best teammates I can ever ask for. Shout out to Raina, Ridik, my juniors, for being here, hooting, supporting. Thank you guys. Shout out to, of course, Angad Bhaiya, Vansh Bhaiya, who I forgot at People Speak, sorry, and Sai Bhaiya for being here, and other members in DTU DAPSOC. Cool. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Our language is limited to letters and numbers. Our medicine is limited to mitigation, and we can't survive viral outbreaks. Our structures are limited to patriarchy globally. Therefore, diversity among humans, even if it exists, is not enough because of Riyan's analysis that we still derive from a single source. I'll first tackle what opening opposition talked about, which was highly uncomparative to begin with, and then talk about the benefits that Riyan gives, that even in a worst case if violence happens and social domination happens, that's still a massive benefit that we get on our side of the house. First, on social interactions. They say that you have empathy to save your own race, but the assumption at opening opposition is that the way you save your own race is by attacking other races, which is unproven. There are two reasons behind that this does not happen. First, Riyan talks to you about that people of different species develop through different perspectives and different social structures. This is inherent to Homo sapiens only, where they want social domination or things like competition. There is no analysis why this would also be inherent to other species. Like, I do not think other species like probably otters live together and do not compete for the river resource or whatever. It's inherent to humans only because of the source that we derive ourselves from. Therefore, it's unlikely that why these people do not deflect to things like negotiation and more likely to deflect to things like attack. This is speculative. But second, since you evolve different mechanisms, you probably would have faced similar competition and similar problems in your own species to begin with. That is to say, Neanderthals attacking other Neanderthals. At a point point of time you also do not want this in your own species because you think this destructs families, destructs homes, you of course create mechanisms from the start as to how you want to negotiate better instead of war. That's how humans have also developed, right? That we do not want to engage in World War III, even if we have engaged in World War I and World War II. So we do not engage in violence in future. So Neanderthals happened like millions of years before Homo sapiens to begin with. So probably Neanderthals have already developed mechanisms of negotiations even before Homo sapiens came into power. So it's unlikely why Homo sapiens then become the tipping point for conflict to happen. But third, I don't think these species are then stupid, because note, Neanderthals or Denisovans are just millions of years before Homo sapiens came into existence to begin with. That means these people have a lot of time to evolve. So probably intuitively you think about Neanderthals as monkeys and chimpanzees, but they're unlikely to be the ones on our side of the house when you allow them to evolve for millions of years and their gene pool to develop. So it's more likely that they know about things like mutual destruction. They know about what happened in the past, and they're unlikely to engage in social domination with other species who come later in power. But fourth, you collaborate for mutual benefit instead. Different races, different genders and status quo still collaborate even if you do not understand each other a lot. I do not know why these people cannot develop technology for communication among them, even if they have language barriers or stuff like that. You have Duolingo right now. But lastly, InfoSlide says that you coexisted with the early humans already, which means that animals coexist with us and we do not try to socially dominate them at all points of time. Probably you kill some, but probably you pet some. I do not think that people have inherent incentives to then dominate everyone. You probably become normalized as you see them around you. You probably marry them also. You probably breed with them even if your child is infertile. People want sex. I don't think that you probably really have the bad intentions that opening opposition talks about. But even at a worst, if competition drives social domination and violence, why this is still good? First, it allows natural selection to allow survival of the fittest. At opposition, they died before even competing Homo sapiens and getting a fair chance at developing technology. So at opposition's best, you get humans who are limited to a lot of numbers. On our side of the house, when you allow different species to compete, you are probably getting a much superior civilization which has better technology, better medicine, better culture to begin with, even if that survival of the fittest happens. But second, the future benefits for millions of years in medicine after one species becomes the dominant in the whole world, which means that they probably provide benefits in terms of culture tech, which saves billions of lives consecutively as years pass down for millions of years since they maintain domination. This scale is much larger than the suffering of few species that happened during the conflict at side opposition. But thirdly, this is uncomparative because humans already engage in competition intravenously, where male kill women, where whites kill black. I do not know why that racism or why that violence is fine, but this violence is not. So probably you still get violence on both sides of the house anyways. They need to prove what is the extent of that and why that's the tipping point for that to win. This means that opening opposition case is uncomparative, but also if it is, you need to weigh it lesser than what Riyan already gives to you. Next, I want to weigh the benefits that Riyan gives in his speech and why they are debate winning. First, it is certain to get different solutions at opening government. There are different genetic structures and ways to perceive problems which are certain in you and inherent in you because you were different species in the same genre to begin with. So it is inherent to how evolution works. So this is biologically certain as a benefit at opening government instead of a speculative harm that you get out of opposition. But second, this is certain to be N+1. Homo sapiens still exist and innovate symmetrically on our side of the house, so you still get the similar innovations, but species who in status quo like animals at opposition, which can't innovate because they are fishes in a tank, they probably do not provide this benefit. Therefore, these species in this specific genre are the tipping point for innovation because they only have the cognitive physical capacity to innovate in terms of computers, tech, medicines, and stuff like that. But thirdly, it's always certain that for humans to evolve in ways to change perception will take, even if we take them at their best, that probably Homo sapiens can also evolve in ways that they can change their inherent genetic something. First, it would take, of course, millions of years. So at their best, you get very, very late innovation, which already means that millions of people have already died. But second, it's also speculative. So your best chance is to increase the species number and faster. But additionally, these are intuition-based understanding, which training also cannot develop. These needs to be inherent in you. That's why fishes can see in dark seas, but humans cannot, even if you train them to do so. This is inherent biologically, which can only come certainly at opening government.
Yeah, the only way in which morality exists right now is that there is only one moral agent that frames this moral framework. In presence of multiple moral agents, what is the likely morality that comes up on your side?
So even if morality exists right now, which is one, that's why it is given precedence. If there are a lot of moralities, that means one morality does not have more power than the other morality. So even if other moralities get killed, that is not a harm to begin with because the best morality still wins at the end of the day and the best moral framework still wins. How does evolution happen? happens. First, you lived in completely different times. Homo sapiens just were a speck of dust in history. They were very less time to evolve. Others are way longer and more time to develop these abilities, so they are likely to get way different solutions. But second, you have different niches and ecological resilience. For example, Neanderthals lived in Ice Age, which Homo sapiens will never live in, so the solutions to solve Ice Age can only develop from these Neanderthals and not Homo sapiens because of the different problems which different species can never face to begin with. But third, social interactions also make new models of communication, because now Neanderthals can communicate with Homo sapiens and collaborate to create much better technology, even if one species can do one thing and the other species can do the other thing. But fourthly, you can still inbreed even if infertile offsprings. Those people can be still scientifically studied, and their genetic manipulation can still help you to build much better tech. You save billions of lives on our side of the house, you get better culture, you get better religions, you get better languages. I think that's the biggest benefit on which you give this win to OG.
Inviting Yellow to close up the debate on top of Yellow. Here.
Right. Yeah, just shout outs to DTU, previous DevSoc and IGNU, current DevSoc, whatever. Okay. Yeah, shout out to Singh. Drink. You should drink more caffeine, and you'll probably realize why you don't need coffee. Okay. Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. I want you to check opening government's engagement. They say that you can collaborate because you have some similarities, but you will not compete because you will not compete with the same things. Either you are someone who has similarities and that means your collaboration is possible, innovation is possible, because just gut check this. How many of you actually talk to a bird or a dog before you take a decision about whether you want to marry someone or not? You do not ask them because you believe that you are morally superior, which means collaboration across through multiple species doesn't really happen in today's world anyway. But if it happens, then you possibly compete with the same things because you have similar kind of incentives. That's why you're collaborating, which means things like fight for food and water are going to be present on their side, and they can't say that this is an uncomparative argumentation because it's just one additional species. But sure, let's take the best case. Even if this is one additional species, I'm going to take a burden to explain why anthropocentrism is the best way to approach this debate and why utility is the most important metric. Firstly, why is anthropocentrism the most crucial? That means Homo sapiens are the most crucial out in this particular universe. 3 reasons. 1, we are driven by long-term purpose, which is beyond survival. Most other or almost every other species go ahead and opt for things like food, water, shelter in the very short term. That means they never cut down on their ability to not have food. They always go ahead and do short-term planning. Only human beings have the brain capacity to go ahead and do long-term planning. Secondly, our ability to have advanced critical thinking and complex brain capacity per their own concession means that we have the most ability to form moral and ethical codes about ourselves. That means anthropocentrism is the most important thing. Thirdly, advanced tools that are used to dominate other species means that you have the most ability to control other factors and other species around you and not the other way around, which means anthropocentrism becomes the way you adjust this debate. But I just want the judges to zoom out for a second. Why did Neanderthal Homo Erectus get wiped out in status quo? Why are they not present? That's the most important thing that opening government misses out on. The reason why they got wiped out by Homo sapiens is because they were not able to survive the competition the Homo sapiens gave them, which means that we had advanced tools, we had more brain power and a long-term planning to go ahead and screw them and wipe them out. There was a clear overlap that happened, but the reason why Homo sapiens survived is because we had more capacity. I think this is exactly what's going to happen when you introduce these people, and because it's a THP motion, so obviously you want to introduce these people in a world where we currently live as well. The problem is, as soon as you have this competition existing, this becomes a problem. The competition is very simple. 1, you will probably go ahead and use these people as subclass citizens, and the reason why you will do this is because of inherent differences that you have with these individuals. This creates a new subclass of discrimination, and this discrimination is very different from things like racism or misogyny as they talk about, because it's biologically proven that these people are subclass citizens as a consequence of them having lesser brain capacity than you, which means it's impossible to escape this discrimination or overturn this, because science will always say that these people have not done as much as you do. But why is this more kind of suffering that exists as a consequence of discrimination the most important thing in the debate? Why is happiness the most important thing? 3 reasons. 1, happiness is the genesis of morality and ethicality, which means you form your moral ethical codes on what gives you the most amount of happiness. So it's deontologically proven. Secondly, you do everything for happiness. Imagine you're coming to this debate tournament eating food. Why? Because you need happiness, which means if happiness on net goes and reduces in this world, it's just bad. Thirdly, I think happiness goes and forms the core of relationships. If this debate happens at a point of time where the earth is limited, has limited resources, and you introduce one more species which goes and competes for same things like energy, food, water, and shelter, you increase human suffering. I think that is the biggest reason why you should go ahead and not have these species right now. But why is this human utility the most important way to judge this debate? Two reasons. The utility is the most proximate things that people have, which means it forms the rationalization of deontology that you currently have. Because deontology forces you to ask questions, which means the kind of decisions you take on those questions is utile, which means utility from the genesis, but also logically prior to deontology itself. Secondly, your morality and ideas do not automatically reflect onto other individuals, but utility does. When you take an action and when the action happens to you, other people get influenced. Deontology is a concept which is isolated to you. That means deontology on scale or utility on scale is the most proximate thing that goes and affects individuals. And if this increases human suffering, I think it's just disutile for this debate to have more people or one more species that goes ahead and competes with us on food. Before I engage further, I'll take closing.
We kill chickens and eat them. Chickens feel bad, we feel happy. Why the feeling of bad is more important than the feeling of happy that the social domination class will get?
The problem is, I am okay to make this trade-off. Even if there are no animals on earth, I am completely fine with this particular world, because these animals go ahead and take up food, energy, and resources which we can use for ourselves as human beings. That's the trade-off I'm making. That any n+1 species that you add to this current planet is going to cause disutility to human beings who are the center of the universe, because explained by anthropocentrism matters. But we also explain that human utility weighs over any sort of morality that other people have, because they do not have the capacity to form moral ethical codes that human beings uniquely can do. That means any one species is going to harm human beings. I will take the trade-off saying that you should have no animals whatsoever. I'm completely fine with this world. We'll just grow like wheat and rice and have a merry time. We don't need non-vegetarians anyway. Cool. Why is competition created the worst kind of competition? Because you are going to compete for the most innate things, the most basic things, like that you go ahead and like opt for things like food and water. The problem is, when these people go ahead and start opting into this, you obviously have to make a concession, because the framing of this argument is just that the resources on earth are limited, which means that insofar as you believe that these people are subclass human beings and you are competing with the same things, you're likely to go ahead and weaponize these individuals. And I will again go ahead and go back to opening government's framing. There is some sort of like overlap that happens in the genetic makeup that you have, which means that these people can collaborate well and give you innovative solutions. The problem is, the innovative solutions look like you going ahead and using them to go ahead and solve these problems. This looks like you using them for medical technology, because you believe you have the similar genetic code to these individuals. Right now, what do you use? Chimpanzees. We think you're going to, on their side, you're going to use even more of these Homo Erectus people and Neanderthals, which causes increased suffering for them as well. I think this is in and of itself is a harm, because there's also increasing human suffering on net. And again, before closing government or the other benches say that, you will just have lesser human beings, I would note that the incentive of human beings to procreate is going to stay symmetric on both sides. You want legacy, you want biological needs, you want to have sex and all those kind of things, which means you're probably going to have 8 billion people anyway. Any additional species is going to add more pressure on this earth, and we're probably going to have at the end of the planet or whatever end of the resources much quicker. That's just bad, because again it increases human suffering. I want to explain to you why human suffering is the most important thing, but also explain to you why disutility of human beings is the most important thing for the most important actor, which is Homo sapiens at that point of time. Lastly, let's just deal with opening government's remaining cases. They say you form innovative solutions, but we explain that cross information or like information crossing species in terms of innovation and ideas doesn't really happen, right? Because you have to go ahead and have the same kind of problems. If Neanderthals just want to build a fire, and human beings want to go to space, they had the burden to explain to us why Neanderthals have that kind of capacity or the creativity or the ability to use abstract language in a manner that is complex and something that human beings are able to understand, or they have the ability to go ahead and develop these things. We can't just fiat that we have Neanderthals for a long time. The reason why they got wiped out is because human beings went ahead and made them second-class citizens and felt that they were competition. That's where you go ahead and that's why this world cannot survive for long duration. For all those reasons, opening opposition.
Inviting the member of government to initiate debate on bottom half. MG, whenever ready, you go.
Hi, a couple of shout-outs before I start my speech. A big shout-out to Arushi. I carried you, you carried me. It was an awesome experience, and the best part is it was Aditya's first DCA, so this comp is extremely special. Shout-out to SRCC Depsok, we all are slaying. Shout-out to Abel also, please do. Cool. Saksham going as MG, preferred pronunciation. I'll take up your F from opening. Match the credits. Cool. Starting speech in 3, 2, one. I'll do a few things in this speech. First, I'll respond to Orbit as a whole. Secondly, on setup, how does the world evolve? Because no framing as of yet. And firstly, the claim I'm going to make. The main extension that we have is that Earth and humanity as a whole are better off, and I'll do a bunch of claims under this. Firstly, on responses to Orbit, then they have this inherent assumption that Homo sapiens are the smartest without any sort of intuition power, without any sort of mechanization, right? Because the biggest clash at top half is that OG says all of them are intelligent. O says that they will go ahead and probably make them slaves because they're not as intelligent. Our analysis is independent of this because of two key reasons. One, we think everyone has bare minimum brain functioning. You aren't comparing a fucking donkey to a Homo sapien, and that is why you can't go ahead and make them slaves. Each of these species, by virtue of this genetics, has bare minimum brain functioning. But second, you won't go with them and colonize them to that degree because you'll be scared to them, and it'll come on to later. But note, we think these species are radically different because, and that is the reason they survive and evolve differently, right? Because we think these are likely to live in geographically different areas, and the reason for that is extremely simple. Tigers and lions don't live in the same territory, and that is the exact reason why they have not won, because lion is clearly more powerful, but they still go ahead and coexist. And I don't understand why they would go ahead and make them sort of slaves in the first place. Because note, each species, regardless of their power, goes ahead and evolves to make them competent to survive in the wild, which probably looks like porcupines having spikes, or probably snakes having venom, so they can defend against themselves from probably other attackers that they might have, or simply lions and tigers having different kind of things that they can use to defend themselves. But secondly, on their idea of overpopulation, you realize you have limited resources. You won't go ahead and overpopulate simply because humans as a whole realize that you have limited resources, and that is why you have bacche dohi acche and schemes like that. And that is the exact reason you don't want your limited resources to run out. Therefore, you won't have overpopulation. I just don't understand that. But then on to setup. Then how does the world evolve? First, we think these people live in geographically different areas, and there are a bunch of reasons for this. We think Neanderthals, Homo erectus got wiped out because of a bunch of reasons, which probably looks like probably volcano eruptions in areas where they were living, or simply lower temperatures or ice age in the areas where they were living. There is no structured reason to say that these people got wiped out because Homo sapiens fucking killed them. There is no proof of war occurring ever between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. I don't fucking understand why they made them slaves, killed them, and that is why Homo sapiens are the only species living right now. At that point, how does the world evolve? We think you develop as starkly dependent and isolated and non-intervening kingdoms where large structured disincentives exist to interact. This probably looks like Wakanda, where you go ahead and make structured mechanisms so that external intruders can't go ahead and intrude your areas in the first place. You build such protectionary mechanisms to go ahead and protect your species from other people who might be more smart, who might be more powerful, but you build mechanisms, you evolve to protect your species, and that is the exact framing that I gave you earlier. But then on to the claims that I'm going to make. Firstly, on the idea of differences and internal conflict within a species being better, there are multiple reasons for this. One, we think you have far less differences between countries, caste, communities, religion, race, because you have a united identity against other species. Why is this likely? Simply because when things like AI occur, humanity comes together, or when matters of alien race occur, humanity comes together as a whole, simply because you realize there is an external competitor which will come in and wipe you out in the first place. And that is why you have more cooperation. You don't have such kind of internal divisions occurring within a species in of itself, not now. Which basically means you treat a common external enemy as probably a threat, and you probably don't get and have that degree of conflict within you. Simple intuition pub is being scared of AI. But second, we think there are structured incentives to stay close and stay collective and innovate with limited resources that you have. Because note, if the framing is that these people live in 4 different parts of the earth and have strong protective mechanisms to differentiate themselves, you have limited resources that you have access to. Meaning, some people have more water, some people have more nuclear resources, some people have more minerals. This basically means you go ahead and innovate more to make your species more efficient in how you use these limited resources, and that is why you probably go ahead and build such great mechanisms and probably look like more developed species using those limited resources. And the intuition behind this is extremely simple, because you have fewer internal human wars, and the intuition purpose, you probably have fewer conflicts occurring within India when India is at war with China or India is at war with Pakistan in of itself, which basically means if you have a common enemy, you don't go ahead and infight. But finally, we think there is a better treatment of women in general, simply because you realize they are the only ones who can extend your species, or who can take forward your progeny, or can go ahead and procreate in the which probably means you go ahead and worship women to a higher degree than you do in status quo, simply because you realize that is the only basis you have to protect your species in of itself. But secondly, then why you protect nature? And I won't take a But secondly, why you protect human nature as a whole better? Because it is empirically true that humans need more stronger reality checks to go ahead and introspect and create change about the damage due to Earth in of itself. Which basically means you start using water energy more carefully, more efficiently when you realize it
is limited or it is going to run out, which basically means when you have limited resources, you have limited area, you get more frequent and stronger reality checks about how you are using these resources. Meaning, you probably treat the limited resources you have better, you probably make your functioning more efficient so that you can defend yourself against competitors who also function as a civilization better. Which basically, on Gov, we think each species limited territory, limited resources, minerals, rivers, which means more judicious use, more reality checks, and that is why you are able to maximize the kind of utility you are able to derive out of the limited resources. With the impacting of this is extremely simple. Two things. One, you probably worship nature a lot more simply because you realize that is the only differentiating factor you have from other species, and is the only thing you can capitalize on to go and probably establish your dominance in the long run. But second, you innovate more and faster to make efficient use of these limited resources that you have. But third, I won't take up you. But thirdly, we think there is an active deterrence for.
Yeah. Context slide says Homo erectus coexisted with humans, just like say dogs, but why does only this species get wiped out and not dogs? Obviously there has to be some competition that led to their wiping out.
Alright, they probably lived near the poles where there was extremely low temperature and they weren't able to innovate, and that is why they probably wiped out. Or you had a fucking volcano eruption where these people were living and they got wiped out. You need to prove by the most likely comparative is that humans went to war with these Neanderthals, and need to prove why there are no inscriptions or no cave paintings that say that you fought with Neanderthals or things like that. But thirdly, why there's an active deterrence for invasion in of itself, and this directly clashes with O's ideas about slavery, because you don't interact or invade areas or species you don't have enough information about, and we are able to, and we'll give you three structural reasons why we think there won't be enough information with you to go and invade these places. Because one, you have no information channels to access information about the degree of innovation of technology that these species have. Meaning, right now you probably know Russia has a nuke, you probably know China has a nuke, you won't fucking know what the other species has, because there is that degree of information cut out, because you won't have a common Wi-Fi that you can talk over. But second, you have no trade route simply because you consider them the enemy. You don't go ahead and trade with the enemy. But third, you're scared of each other because of the counterbalance mechanism. You probably have different technology you don't know about. You don't want to risk the eradication of your species just because you want to acquire some area or do some kind of annexation in of itself. The impacting of this is extremely simple. You don't take the trade-off of a war simply because you fear the eradication of Homo sapiens. You have no information about their attack mechanism, which basically means the intuition from here is that there's a nuclear counterbalance status quo when no one uses the nuke, and that is the exact counterbalance that we think will exist most likely simply because you don't know what the other person has, and that is the exact reason why you don't go ahead and invade aliens. You probably protect yourself from aliens. Extremely proud to propose.
I'd like to thank the member of government for their very fine speech, inviting the member of opposition now to open up case for Team Zero. Emo, here.
Hi, audible? Audible? Hi, Ansuman. I will take opening. Wait, shout-outs first. Shout-outs. First shout-out to my girlfriend, Suhani. She supported me a lot. Second shout-out to Samarth, who has also supported me a lot. Third shout-out to Abel, of course, has carried me throughout the tournament. Same preferences, I'll preferably take opening government. I'll start on my first vote. Life in and of itself is suffering, existence is pain. We'll just prove why there is more population, and we'll have better mechanisms than opening opposition, which are a lot more speculative, on proving why existence fundamentally in and of itself is pain. Notice that this will also bypass the top half clash, because top half says either that you will fight or you will collaborate. Notice with the way in which I'll prove my case, nothing will matter. It wouldn't matter if you collaborate. It wouldn't matter if you fight, as long as there are more people and there is
more intelligent life on this world, it's fundamentally pain. But the first thing I want to do here is talk about how opening opposition knives their OTAs. The first thing they do is they say that, you will enslave other people, Homo sapiens will enslave other people, which is a bad thing. But then they say anthropocentrism, which means that Homo sapiens pleasure is the best thing possible. It's unclear then why this slavery matters, which means that slavery of other species is a knife of their own case, which means either anthropocentrism is true or the slavery of other species is bad is something that's true. They can't claim both of these things. The second way in which they knife this is LO says utilitarianism is the best metric, and then DLO relies a lot on proving deontological things on why particularly anthropocentrism is good. The second way in which I want to highlight this, however, they say anthropocentrism is particularly good because we can do long-term thinking and we can have our own source of morality, except they don't explain why other species don't have their sources of morality. The other species can't do long-term thinking because opening opposition reasoning is completely speculative. They say that Homo sapiens rose out because they outcompeted others a lot, but possibly there could have been a genetic shift. Possibly these species were not supported by the climate they were living in, and possibly they could have been smarter species than Homo sapiens in the first place. Opening opposition relies on entirely speculative analysis on why particularly Homo sapiens are the most important thing in the world. But notice, we will not knife this. We won't say Homo sapiens are not important, more important or not important. I will just say all intelligent life is important, and as long as there is more intelligent life, there is more suffering. But there are a couple of burdens within this that I want to prove. Why is intelligent life particularly something that's important? Notice, intelligent life particularly has the capacity to feel higher intensities of pain and pleasure, which means that regardless of, if you kill an ant or you kill a bacteria, they don't feel the same amount of pain, they don't feel the same amount of pleasure as intelligent species can feel, because one, they can feel greater intensities of pain and pleasure because they have greater neurological capacity in doing these things. But second, they can feel a range of emotions, which means they can feel a lot different pains, a lot different pleasure, and things like that. The third thing under this is that all of these people are the ones who are moral agents, which means they dictate what is suffering, they dictate what is pleasure, and all of these things, which means that the only way to categorize what is pain and pleasure is if you are moral agents who can add morality into this pain is suffering and this pain is not suffering. An ant can't say that they're in pain. An intelligent being can claim that they're in pain. But notice, now I will prove why particularly pain is something that's more proximate and more important to any intelligent species in the first place. There are a couple of reasons for this. One, notice that pain is a lot more certain because pleasure depends on what range of species you're in, which is to say what time frame of evolution you're in. Maybe you're in your Neolithic age, at which point of time your daily thing that you want to do is hunt and all of those other things, and you don't have the capacity to self-actualize into a lot of different ways, hence you can't attain the kind of certain pleasure that other teams are talking about. But you can always have certain pain when somebody bites you, when somebody kills you, and all of these things. But notice, there is an evolutionary incentive to prioritize pain over pleasure, which is to say, evolution wants you to have less and less pain so that you can grow more, which means that the way in which evolution does this, the process does this, is that they add greater intensity to feeling pain than to pleasure. But notice, there is also a social obligation, and most states and everyone in the world automatically thinks that pain is something that is far more certain, and you want to protect people from pain far more certainly than you want to give them pleasure, because there is no obligation for someone to feel happy. But we think that due to rights, there is an obligation for people to not feel pain in the first place, and we want to protect every intelligent life or every intelligent person from feeling pain in the first place. Now I'll explain a couple of things. Why is life certainly pain, and why this is something that is better than whatever opening opposition says. The first reason why life is fundamentally pain is because of evolution and energy. Notice the way in which evolution works and the way in which energy works is that you have to consume, and you have to be consumed by each other in the first place, which means at a point in time, this consumption is something that's certain. Notice a lot of people have to die for evolution to work in the first place, which is to say there are genetic defects, and the only way in which evolution works is that people who have these genetic defects get outcompeted by other people, even individually within their own species. His opening opposition cannot hear here, because opening opposition's mech is that you will compete and fight against each other, which is why you will fall to competition. My mech does not rely on that. As long as you are evolving, you have to compete, and as long as you are competing, you will have more pain than pleasure. But the second reason behind this is a lot of times purpose is pain. Opening opposition just asserts this at the end of leader of opposition. They say that consciousness is pain, and consciousness is pain because you ask questions. But why is asking questions fundamentally something that is directly pain? Because notice, the problem within this is a lot of times you are born in a world, you're born in a pale blue dot where you don't know what is happening outside your own universe. You don't know what will happen after death. You don't know if there's meaning to your suffering. You don't know who sent you out. You don't know a lot of these things, which means that there are two options for you. Either, go ahead before that.
Humans are limited to calculus, CG is limited to derivatives, but your weighing is 7 billion people suffering much more, whose number is still increasing, versus 10 billion are outside living much better lives who can create mechanisms to control population.
The problem, however, is that their benefits only unlock when innovation happens. There are thousands of years, millions of years before innovation can happen, because you don't have technological capacity, at which point of time, at a point in time where you can't innovate, people just suffer. And they also haven't proven why they beat the mechanisms of why life is inherently pain. But notice, the second reason why purpose is inherently pain. At a point in time where you cannot find purpose, you have to resort to two things. Either you become deeply nihilistic and you lose meaning in your life, or you create artificial meaning in your life. Even if that gives you happiness, that is still something that is a moral wrong on you, because you are deluding yourself, you're living a false life, and you're particularly forcing yourself to believe in something that causes great harm onto society and onto other people, because it blindsides you into believing from or finding out things that are particularly true. But the third reason why this is certainly pain is reproduction is pain. The reason why reproduction is pain is you are robbed of your moral agency, because you are directly attached to someone else, and your actions and your utility is something that is converged on the other person's actions to you, because reproduction inherently needs you to fall in love. Reproduction inherently needs you to want sex, and it inherently makes you dependent on other beings, which means as long as there are more beings dependent on the source of their utility onto other beings and things like that, which is why life is fundamental pain.
Inviting now the government whip to conclude case on behalf of government. Government, when are ready, here.
Hello, audible?
Audience, please. Here. Support करिए बात.
Hi, Arushi going as government whip. Couple of shout outs. Firstly to Abel. Abel's just great. Saksham for agreeing to team up with me last minute. Honestly, I wasn't even intending on coming to Manzar, so if he wouldn't have said yes, we probably would not be at this comp. And first ever major comp OJF, I'm glad to have Saksham. For being DCA at Manzar, honestly single-handedly carrying SRCC society to God knows what lengths. Kartikeya, Shreya for being here, supporting us. My juniors who put in so much effort to show up to comps despite not seeing results yet, but I promise they will. And yeah, just DepSoc SRCC in general, and my mom for scolding me when I told her that I want to leave debating and I shouldn't because it helps me get admission into London colleges, but okay. Starting speech in 3, 2, 1. CO case simply does not make sense, or it simply does not have a delta, because their case is that pain is something that's inherent, and more intelligent species should not exist because now more species will feel pain, or more individuals will feel pain. I am unsure as to why 4 species existing mean the population of intelligent species is more than what currently exists. That means if 8 billion humans exist right now, we think in totality still 8 billion of in 8 billion in total of 4 individual species are still likely to exist. So the numeracy metric that they're claiming is that pain is more because more species are existing. We don't think that the population of individuals is more in and of itself, and then that is how pain is worse off. So we think that their delta is something that's missing. On OO then, Saksham does enough legwork on to prove how their frame in and of itself is flawed, right? On firstly telling that there inherently exists a massive divide in the kind of intellectual capability between these species in and of itself, because we tell you that there's no evidence of them going ahead and wiping each other out, but probably unpredictable circumstances which went ahead and did that. But secondly, if you're debating this motion on the existence of all species, that means even if they claim that right now they got wiped away because humans went ahead and killed them, for the sake of this debate you have to assume that did not happen, because you're assuming that all 4 of them are surviving together right now. That means humans did go ahead and kill them, they coexisted and things like that. Why does that happen right now, right? We tell you at a point in time, humans are able to go ahead and create all of the bullshit that they do right now is simply because they aren't scared of any other species killing them. They're able to go ahead and waste massive amounts of Earth's resources on space exploration because that's something that excites them but also scares them. That is the reason why they go ahead and spend maximum amount of funding maximum amount of funding to ensure that they are protected at all points in time. That is to go ahead and say that the primary incentive of human beings is to protect themselves. And we tell you at a point in time these 4 species are probably having the same level of intellectual capacity, but they're probably different in terms of their physical aspects. That means you probably evolved to look a little different depending on which part of Earth you inherently evolved from. We think that is the primary difference that's likely to happen. Note what happens then. When you know there exists a competing intelligent species on your land or on Earth, you want to go ahead and make sure that whatever it is that you hold, you protect that to the maximum extent. That means the land on which you grew, the land on which you evolved, you inherently worship that land. You make sure that the resources on that land are something that do not go extinct or do not get exploited entirely, because you don't have the capacity to venture out into other lands and occupy them. Why do we say so? Because you are inherently scared, because if you know how intelligent you are, you probably also assume that the other species is as intelligent as you are, probably because of communication, etc. But secondly, if you know that you can think of really bad things to do to yourself and do to them, you also know that they are also thinking of really bad things to do to you and to themselves. So that means that you are at all points in time extremely scared of them. This does not apply presently, because you're able to go ahead and probably kill a lion, because you know a lion cannot develop guns to kill you back. We think that that's the basic framing as to why you're so scared of this different species, which is why you go ahead and worship this land that you're on, and you go ahead and maximize the utility of these resources, but you also ensure that you have enough to survive on this land for its entirety. We tell you, weighing on OG is simple. They tell you that you are probably likely to have different ways of solving solutions, and so you are just inherently better because you have more perspectives. Our analysis on why human society is better off is completely independent of that, because their claims hinge largely on collaboration happening between these species, etc., which always fair to point out that if you're so scared of each other, you don't want to go ahead and collaborate, you want to go ahead and protect yourselves, and you're probably going to be angry, or you're probably not going to be friendly with them. We think that our analysis on why human society is better then. We tell you that at a point in time you're so scared of another intelligent species going ahead and taking over you, you don't go ahead and prioritize infighting. That means humans don't have the incentive to be better than other humans. Humans don't want to go ahead and create poverty, so in order for few humans to go ahead and have maximum control over resources and create that level of society dysfunctionality which presently exists. Because note, this kind of dysfunctionality is something that makes society weak in and of itself. Government in these countries or in these regions probably does not have the time and the capacity to deal with protests happening from other humans, at the same time creating strong enough boundaries to protect themselves from other highly intelligent species. That means they won't go ahead and antagonize their public to such a large extent that their own public is creating a defense or a national security issue for them in and of itself. At a point in time, this government drainage and going ahead and controlling these protests instead of developing or instead of creating your boundaries, etc. Pure.
Our case is not contingent on who's smarter or better, but that someone will be smarter or better. This mutual acknowledgement is what creates this fear that makes our case fly. OG is out because innovation may never happen until the world ends.
I think even if they are fair to assume that someone might be smarter or better, how do you even go ahead and discover that, right? We tell you that on a basic level, you know the kind of intelligence that they hold in and of itself. In order to know whether or not they are actively smarter than you have to go ahead and venture into their lands. Why would they let you simply venture into their lands, right? They are also scared of you. They set up boundaries. There's information asymmetry. At no points in time do you have complete knowledge about these people. Panel is very intuitive, right? If you're likely to discover a separate alien population on a nearby planet, your first reaction isn't to go ahead and land on that planet and colonize that planet and take away their resources. Your first incentive is to probably see if they're capable of attacking you and maximizing or strengthening your own society to the fullest extent. That means even if you identify a possible threat right now and government needs to direct funds in order to deal with that threat, for example creating a better shield etc. for you, government has to go ahead and make sure that its resources which are being wasted in other spheres, for example having to deal with protests or for example having to deal with poverty because of the inherent problems that human beings create for themselves, they're likely to want to solve those problems faster so that they can go ahead and create this shield which is proximate to them, which is a primary need for them right now to go ahead and protect themselves. We tell you that resource drain into futile activities which take away resources from earth but simply go ahead and fuel human curiosity is something that does not happen, because right now your primary incentive then is to just make sure that you are safe in and of itself. And for all of those reasons, proud to propose.
I'd like to thank the government whip for that very fine speech. Inviting now the opposition whip to conclude the debate as a whole. Op whip, whenever you're ready, it's countdown. Jump.
Couple of shout outs. Firstly to Arushi, this is the cutest thing ever. We're in the finals together. She keeps me going. Shout out to my parents. My mom sent me a thumbs up when I said I'm in finals. Shout out to Anshuman. DU has more and more good debaters to go against DTU now. Shout out to my best friends, Navakant and Shreya. Shout out to Jha, DCA, crazy shit. Shout out to SR Depsok and shout out to Karthikeya for specking as well. Saksham. Shout out to Saksham. Shout out to Saksham. Starting on a self count of 3, 2, and 1. I'm first going to prove why there are likely to be more people in existence. The reason you can't compare it to right now or status quo is because human beings or Homo sapiens didn't have to compete necessarily with the most proximate kind of attacks in and of itself, which means right now there's no incessant need for you to directly procreate more and more because there's no direct and active threat against it. The implication is that insofar you have an active threat that you view as someone who is probably similar to your capacities, you have a higher need to go ahead and procreate more and more in and of itself, which means the inherent need for you to create more and more offsprings to be able to protect your community at large, and more importantly to be able to establish your lineage and its longevity for longer amounts of time only exists on our side of the world, because that is an inherent need for you at every given point in time. Opposition has to, government necessarily has to concede to this in and of itself. But the second idea is pretty simple, right? Insofar you have a predator-prey mechanism, the only way for you to ensure sustainability or long life is that you go ahead and reproduce. But more importantly, I think the inherent need for you to strengthen communities to ensure that people are happier within your communities at large, ensure or create a need for you to actively go ahead and create good communities in and of itself. And as a result of that, you have a higher need to go ahead and procreate more and create more amounts of population in and of itself. I think as a result of that alone, we're able to prove that through one way or the other by utilizing more and more amounts of resources by virtue of utilizing natural resources or cutting down trees or higher amounts of consumption, you're likely to want to increase your offspring count at any given point in time in and of itself. For all those reasons, we're able to prove more amounts of intelligent beings that are alive on this earth at any given point in time, and that is certain. The reason this is necessarily likely to be bad, which is to say more amounts of intelligent beings having the capacity to think for themselves or reason out, is likely to feel more amounts of pain by virtue of evolution, and that's something I'll prove a little later. The idea is pretty simple. Insofar we're moral creatures, the most good thing for us to do right now is to err to the side of caution and to ensure lesser amount of negative utility is likely to be ensured on our side of the world. And as a result of that, the most certain kind of pain is something that we minimize on our side of the world, and that is something that comes exclusively from CO. But with that in place, I think the reason we are able to have more amounts of lesser amounts of bad utility or lesser amounts of pain on our side of the world is simply because you have lesser number of people in existence. Why is pain likely to be more proximate at any given point in time? We think that insofar you have the ability to rational and think and ask questions, you're constantly likely to compare yourself with other people in and of itself. This looks like you necessarily suppressing the kind of good thoughts that you have by constantly weighing the bad feelings that you have in and of itself. As a result of that, you're likely to have a significant amount of cognitive dissonance in day-to-day thought. But more importantly, I think this pain is something that's more proximate to you, and you're much more likely to weigh that over the other things or the other good things that you have in and of itself. But let's exactly go ahead and talk about what CG has to say. I don't think CG has a more like a positive case, it's largely responses. But I think the preliminary idea is that they have a knife to OG frame, because if OG suggests that people are likely to collaborate and create more innovations, they first have to prove, or like CG goes in and necessarily says that you're likely to be more isolationary in and of itself, which means you create a Wakanda system, you create more security to ensure all of this, which necessarily proves that they never have any form of active communication between the societies in and of itself, which implies that you cannot necessarily actualize on these innovations at large. As a result of that, I think that's a direct knife to whatever OG has to say in and of itself. But secondly, they tell you that they use resources a lot more judicially. They don't prove to you why exactly this use of resources judicially weighs over the inherent need for you to be more assertive and to ensure the stability of your particular community in and of itself. Because recognize, insofar you utilize resources more judicially, you necessarily have to compromise on the stability or security of your community in and of itself. But secondly, they don't prove why the alternative is not just fighting against other communities to go ahead and assert dominance in and of itself, which implies that you have more amounts of expansionary policies. Recognize probably Germany wanted to start the World War because they wanted to establish more amounts of dominance in general, which means if you have more number of people that want to necessarily secure their positions at large, they necessarily have to prove why people don't opt into that on their side of the world. But let's move on to what OG has to say at large. I think OG's idea is speculative at best, because they don't necessarily prove to you the extent of this innovation, but secondly, why this innovation is so important in and of itself. Because recognize, I think that insofar you have a larger number of species and diversity within society, that probably comes with a larger amount of problems in and of itself, which looks like newer amounts of diseases, newer amounts of political nuances that you have to cater to, but more importantly, I think newer amounts of morality clashes at any given point in time. The implication is that one, they don't prove to you to the extent of their innovations or positive utility on their side of the world. But what we're able to tell you is that presumably because of a newer amount or a larger amount of problems that you have in their speculative society, at all points in time they don't provide any net positive utility that you then derive in society as a whole. Because presumably with more amounts of good shit that you have, you also have a higher amount of bad shit at any given point in time. Recognize it becomes further worse from them because they never prove to you the incentive to collaborate at any given point in time. Insofar you can never collaborate, you can never co-opt into any of the positive net benefits that they have at any given point in time. For all of those reasons, I think OG is largely just speculative and they are unable to exactly go ahead and prove any of their impacts on their side of the world. I think at all points in time then, innovation at any given point in time is just simply unjustified. At a point in time, you have more amounts of suffering in the world in general. One is because this innovation is something that may or may not necessarily trickle down to the most vulnerable people who are probably devoid of consent at any given point in time. Recognize if more amount of people are under pain, you are never able to go ahead and ask them if they want to take this pain for more amounts of innovation and diversity at any given point in time. So at all points in time then, this innovation never really benefits the people that you want to benefit at any given point in time. But secondly, I think insofar you've never really asked for consent, you never give these people the choice to go ahead and choose exactly what it is that they want at any given point in time. For anything else, opening.
Your opening already talks about different incentives to procreate, but I'll correct my previous POI. There are not 7 billion people, but also these 4 species that still exist in your House. You have no delta on the amount of population.
we have a delta because at all points, so that's the thing, they debate on the wrong comparative. If you think of what we're thinking of right now, the reason probably right now intuitively human beings don't have an incentive to procreate as much is because you don't recognize a very proximate harm in and of itself. If you recognize that the person or the community are like giants and things like that, and they can literally take you at any given point in time, you have a higher incentive to procreate, which is why the most vulnerable poor people on earth right now have a higher incentive to procreate more as opposed to the most privileged people in New York and things like that, which means they have to prove that kind of incentive at any given point in time. With that in place, I think OG also is something that's speculative at best. They don't really prove it. The reason we at closing opposition are certain is because we tell you a universal idea on the fact that the net utility that more people on earth get are negative because you have more amounts of bad nuances that exist in and of itself. Opening opposition's case is entirely about fighting. One, fighting is speculative. People may fight, people may not fight, depending on at any given point in time on the amount of nuances that there exist in and of itself. But secondly, they never cater to the idea that presumably there may be some degree of fighting, tiredness and things like that, which means they don't talk about the intensity of fighting at any given point in time. The only certain intensive thing is the pain that you get from evolution at any point in time. For all of those reasons, it's very important.